I honestly can't remember the last time a political moment exposed someone this efficiently. Because what we're about to examine isn't spectacle or outrage, but a man undone by the image he works so hard to sell. And that man is J.D. Vance, who managed to deliver one of the most stiff, awkward, and quietly humiliating moments a modern politician can have. So revealing, in fact, that Donald Trump is visible, standing directly behind him, wearing that familiar look of irritation reserved for people who embarrass you without realizing it. Not anger, not surprise, disgust. This wasn't a mishap. It wasn't bad timing. It was exposure unfolding in real time. And if this kind of unfiltered moment matters, the kind that doesn't need spin or slogan supporting this channel, helps keep a spotlight on moments exactly like this. Because this didn't happen behind closed doors. It happened in public. In front of the Ohio State Buckeyes, Vance's alma mater, national champions standing in the White House. And before Vance managed to humiliate himself, we first had to sit through Donald Trump's introduction, which, as always, had almost nothing to do with honoring the team and everything to do with pulling the attention back to where he believes it belongs.
That offensive line is so important. You have no idea. I've seen teams that were great, but they didn't have the offensive line, and it just doesn't work out, right, Will? You beat the Fighting Irish that day, 34-23, and for the first time in 10 years, proudly claimed the title of the great state of Ohio, the great state. I love that state. We won that state in a landslide, Governor. I swear, I promise. And if I let you down, he won't, okay? So you have a backup. But I do love the place. And so today I'm honored to call the Ohio State University Buckeyes national champions. You're the national champions, and you're standing right here at the White House.
The national champions are standing right there, yet Donald Trump still manages to turn the entire moment into a performance about himself. It is never about the team, never about the achievement, never about the occasion. It is always about Trump, his ego, and his need to relive a so-called landslide victory that has nothing to do with why anyone is in that room. And listen closely to the empty flattery, because this is what Trump does when he wants something. Suddenly it's the great state of Ohio. Suddenly it's, I love that state. Suddenly it's promises and oaths delivered with a grin, all carefully calibrated for applause. But this is the same man who, not long ago, looked directly at the country and smeared Ohio with grotesque lies, claiming people there were eating dogs, eating cats, eating their neighbors' pets. That's not affection, that's contempt, briefly disguised as praise when the cameras are on and the votes are needed.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country.
Wow. This is what a carefully scripted LI looks like when it's delivered with confidence and zero proof. The accusation is dramatic, the imagery is designed to shock, and the fear is pushed as fact, even though nothing underneath it holds together. But no matter how polished Trump tries to make the story sound, it collapses the moment it's handed to his most loyal defender. J.D. Vance is asked a simple question: where is the evidence? And he has none. No documentation, no confirmation, just vague claims and secondhand whispers. Then Ohio law enforcement steps in and does what facts always do. They shut the story down completely. And in trying to rescue Trump from his own lie, Vance only makes it worse, exposing not just the falsehood, but the recklessness behind repeating it at all.
Well, first of all, city officials have not said it's not true. They've said they don't have all the evidence.
They said they have no evidence.
We've heard from a number of constituents on the ground, Caitlin, who both firsthand and secondhand reports saying this stuff is happening.
If someone calls your office and says they saw Bigfoot, that doesn't mean they saw Bigfoot. Why? I mean, you have a sense of responsibility as a running mate, and he certainly does as the candidate to not promote false information,
Look,
right?
Caitlin, it's a totally fair point, but nobody's calling my office and saying that they saw Bigfoot. what they're calling and saying is we're seeing migrants kidnap our dogs and cats, and city officials aren't doing anything about it.
What Vance actually described, without realizing it, was this. No facts, no verification, just rumors elevated into accusations because they generate attention, credibility, and ultimately votes. That's the part he never pauses long enough to acknowledge. Instead, this is the thinking and the conduct of a sitting vice president of the United States. Let that sink in. Is this leadership or is it calculated provocation? Is this public service or is it the deliberate manufacturing of fear and division to seize a microphone and refuse to let go of it? Vance isn't correcting misinformation, he's auditioning. He wants what Trump has: volume, visibility, and permanent access to the spotlight. He wants to shout louder, say less, and turn politics into a traveling circus where facts are optional and outrage is currency. And that brings us to J.D. Vance and the humiliating moment that followed him today, made worse by what he says next. Because after revealing how little evidence actually exists, he pivots immediately to this clip where he casts himself not as reckless, but as righteous is. Watch closely.
My message to young men is, I think that our culture sends a message to young men that you should suppress every masculine urge. You should try to cast aside your family. You should try to suppress what makes you a young man in the first place. And I think that my message to young men is, don't allow this broken culture to send you a message that you're a bad person because you're a man, because you like to tell a joke, because you like to have a beer with your friends, or because you're competitive. It's our message, the cultural message, and I think the president's and mine is the exact opposite, but our cultural message is, I think that it wants to turn everybody, whether male or female, into androgynous idiots who think the same, talk the same, and act the same. We actually think God made male and female for a purpose, and we want you guys to thrive as young men and as young women, and we're going to help with our public policy to make it possible to do that.
J.D. Vance likes to present himself as a symbol of masculinity, the tough, relatable guy who cracks beers with his buddies and lectures the country about what it means to be a man. But none of it holds up. What you actually see is stiffness, calculation, and a personality so forced it feels rehearsed. There is no ease, no warmth, no natural confidence. The performance never becomes believable. And yet the MAGA media machine insists on selling this myth anyway, claiming Vance is somehow tougher, more masculine, more appealing than his critics. Jesse Waters even tried to frame it as a comparison Vance versus Tim Walz, as if masculinity were something you could measure by mockery and sneering. Listen carefully to what they offer next, because it says far more about them than it ever does about Tim Walz.
Women love masculinity, and women do not love Tim Walz. So that should just tell you about how masculine Tim Walz is. The other day, you saw him with a vanilla ice cream shake. Had a straw in it. Oh. Again, that tells you everything. Judge Janine.
So now it is Tim Walz who is labeled not masculine enough. Tim Walz is the one dismissed as awkward and unappealing. That is the claim being pushed, and it only takes a moment for it to fall apart. On that same day, J.D. Vance stood beside his hometown team, his alma mater, the Ohio State Buckeyes, the national champions of college football. This was supposed to be his element: sports, tradition, the image he likes to project. And because it was his team, he chose to present them with the championship trophy. But this was not the Lombardi. It was not the Larry O'Brien. The college championship trophy is different. It does not have a fixed base. Anyone who truly follows the sport knows that. J.D. Vance didn't recognize it. He didn't understand what he was holding. And in that moment, the performance collapsed. This wasn't bad luck. It was exposure. Watch carefully what comes next. And yes, that clip of JD Vance deserves to be seen again, because repetition is sometimes the only way reality cuts through denial. Anyone who has watched even a little college football knows that trophy does not have a base. It is not the NBA trophy, it is not the Lombardi, it is not the World Cup. Those trophies sit on platforms. This one does not. You lift it. That is how it works. Anyone who follows the sport would know this instantly. The man who brands himself as the Ohio guy, the sports guy, the authenticity guy, didn't know the most basic detail about the trophy. At that point, the branding collapses. What's left is performance and nothing underneath it. This was not an unavoidable mistake. Politicians have advanced teams. Staff brief them. People warn them about exactly this kind of moment. None of that mattered, because Vance walked out there unprepared, unaware, and exposed. He did not understand the trophy. He did not understand the moment, and he humiliated himself because of it. There is no strength in scrambling on the floor. There is no masculinity in panic. And even Trump, standing behind him, looked like he could not believe what he was watching. The people around him knew it too. That moment said everything. This should not surprise anyone. JD Vance is a performance. The fandom is staged. The confidence is borrowed. The hypocrisy runs so deep it shows up even in something as basic as sports. And somehow this is supposed to outweigh a milkshake joke about Tim Walz. It does not. And that hypocrisy does not stop with sports. These are the same people who claim to worship the rule of law while actively undermining it. That contradiction is exactly what Bernie Sanders has been warning about. Listen carefully to what he says next.
We're fighting a president who undermines our Constitution every day, who threatens our freedom of speech and assembly, and whose agents are rounding up innocent people off the streets, throwing them into unmarked vans, and bringing them to detention centers in this country and abroad. That is what takes place in dictatorships, not in America. We will not allow them to continue to do that. The founding, I find myself trying to remember my history lessons. Should have done better in history. But I think back to the founding of this country. And let me tell you, the founding fathers of this country were no dummies. They remember the history. We're talking about the 1780s. They had just fought a war, an impossibly difficult war, where they defeated the King of England, the most powerful person on the planet. Let's hear it for George Washington. But anyhow, these guys had taken on an autocrat, and they sit around and they said, all right, what do we want in our new country? What do we want? And what they said is, we don't want any one person to have all of that power. So they dealt with the Federalist Papers and all that stuff, and they came up with this kind of brilliant idea of a separation of powers. All right? They said we're going to have a legislative branch, Congress, House, and Senate. We are going to have a executive branch, the president. We're going to have a judiciary, the federal courts. And each one will have check on each other. And what I want to tell you, and I don't need to tell you, I think you're seeing it every single day. You have a president who is working overtime to take power away from the Congress. You got a president who is working overtime to take power away from the federal courts. Now, it is unprecedented. You know, no president, no member of Congress wants to see a Supreme Court or any court rule against him or her. We don't like to see that. And I will tell you that we have seen in the last 20 years with the Roberts Court horrendous decisions on Citizens United and Roe versus Wade, terrible decisions. But we understand that we live in a rule of law. What Trump and his friends are doing now is they're saying, oh, a judge ruled against us. A judge said we can't do something which is unconstitutional. Let us get rid of that judge. Let us impeach that judge. So in other words, you take power away from Congress, you take power away from the judiciary, and also you got a president who really does not like to be criticized. So he is sued. I mean, this is, again, unprecedented. He has sued ABC, CBS, Meta, the Des Moines Register. The Des Moines Register did a poll he didn't like. They are suing him. They are investigating right now PBS and NPR. So you add it all together. And what I would say to Trump, if you cannot take criticism, get out of the political process. This is a democracy, and criticism is an essential part of that democracy.
What the anti-oligarchy tour has made crystal clear is what happens when real leaders stop hiding behind press releases and finally meet the moment head-on. This isn't just about rallies or organizing. It's about presence, about leaders willing to step out of Washington, stand face-to-face with people, and speak directly to the anger, fear, and bone-deep exhaustion that millions of Americans wake up with every single day. We don't elect officials simply to cast votes and vanish into the ether. We elect them to lead. True leadership means more than opposition. It means organizing, building real pressure, and showing the public not only what you stand against, but exactly how you plan to fight for something better. Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are proving that right now. They're naming the problem without apology, confronting concentrated power head-on, and refusing to water down the truth just to make people comfortable. That kind of courage matters deeply, and it deserves our sustained focus and support. Of course, telling the truth also requires calling out the hollow performances that try to distract from it. JD, Vance's self-inflicted moment belongs squarely in that category, and it deserves to be remembered, not out of pettiness, but because it lays bare the emptiness behind the polished rhetoric. This isn't really about one man or one viral clip. It's about the kind of country we decide to become, one ruled by noise, spectacle, and empty posturing, or one grounded in honesty, responsibility, and genuine leadership. If we truly want a stronger, more authentic America, it begins with demanding better from our politics and, just as importantly, from ourselves. If this kind of unflinching, clear-eyed perspective speaks to you, staying connected to this channel is one of the smartest ways to keep it alive and growing. And if you've made it all the way to the end, well, you already know what that blue heart really means. Until next time.